It was a night like no other, a gathering that few people could imagine. The guests were carefully chosen, not by their fame alone, but for the sheer strength of their achievements. There, sitting at a long table in a cozy, dimly lit restaurant in Beverly Hills, were some of the most famous athletes in the world. But the most interesting part wasn't just who was there, it was who wasn't there. LeBron James and Tom Brady, two of the most recognizable names in sports, had never shared a dinner before. Sure, they had seen each other in passing at events or through interviews, but tonight was different. It wasn't a business meeting or a press event. It was just a dinner, a chance for these two athletes to sit and talk like regular people. The only thing they shared in common at that moment was the massive impact they had on their respective sports. LeBron arrived first, dressed in a sharp gray suit that fit him perfectly. He looked like someone who had been through the highs and lows of a long career, but still had the energy to keep pushing. The restaurant was quiet, with only a few other guests scattered throughout the space. LeBron settled into his chair, his eyes scanning the room for any familiar faces. He had been to a lot of these kinds of dinners before, gatherings where athletes from different sports came together, but the vibe was usually awkward. Tonight, though, he hoped for something different. As he waited, he noticed the staff carefully preparing everything for the evening. The soft glow from the overhead lights gave the place a calm atmosphere, and the delicious smell of freshly baked bread and roasted vegetables filled the air. LeBron leaned back in his chair, letting the calmness of the setting settle him. Just as he began to relax, the door opened, and in walked Tom Brady. The room seemed to pause for a moment. Brady, the man who had won so many Super Bowls, walked in with the same calm confidence that had defined his career. Like LeBron, he was dressed in a suit, though his was slightly more casual, with a touch of elegance. He smiled at LeBron, who stood up to greet him. Their handshake was firm but not overdone, like two professionals who respected each other but weren't quite sure how to start a conversation. After a few quick words, the two took their seats. The rest of the table soon filled with other guests, people who had made names for themselves in different sports, all sharing a table in a rare moment of quiet. It was hard not to feel the energy shift when these giants of sport gathered in one place. There was a certain magic to it, a quiet understanding that these were the people who had reshaped their games and their industries. Everyone was in awe of how different yet similar their paths had been. The night had only just begun, and yet it already felt like a special occasion. Everyone knew that what happened next could be more than just a dinner. It could be the beginning of something memorable. The dinner was starting to feel more like an event, though it was meant to be casual. The conversation was flowing as everyone exchanged stories from their careers. LeBron and Tom, two of the biggest stars at the table, hadn't spoken much yet. They had greeted each other with respect, but it was clear they were still feeling each other out. After all, even the most famous athletes don't always know what to say when they're sharing a meal with others in their field. LeBron leaned back in his chair, watching the others around the table. The conversation seemed to shift from one topic to another. Some talked about memorable moments in their careers, others about what it took to get to the top. But as the night went on, it became clear that everyone was waiting for LeBron and Tom to share their stories. After all, they were the ones everyone knew best. It was then that one of the guests, a former basketball coach, turned to LeBron. "So, LeBron," he asked, "when did you first realize you were different? When did you know that you were going to be one of the best?" LeBron smiled and glanced around the table. "There were a lot of moments," he said. "But if I had to pick one, it would be during my first playoff series against the Washington Wizards. I was just a kid, and I wasn't sure if I could handle the pressure. But then I went out and scored 32 points in a game when my team needed me the most. That's when I knew I wasn't just playing basketball, I was doing something special." Everyone around the table nodded, impressed. The coach even clapped lightly, and the others followed suit. It was clear that LeBron had earned his place at the table, not just through his talent, but through his leadership and hard work. Tom, who had been sitting quietly, took a deep breath before speaking. "I can relate to that," he said, looking at LeBron. "For me, it was the 2001 draft. I wasn't supposed to be the 199th pick. Everyone overlooked me, but I just kept working. I didn't let the doubters stop me. And then when I won my first Super Bowl, I knew it was all worth it. The others leaned in, hanging on every word. It was hard not to admire both LeBron and Tom for their journeys. Each of them had fought through challenges, moments when they were counted out, only to come out stronger. It was that shared experience of overcoming obstacles that connected them, even if they played different sports. LeBron nodded. It's crazy how the game has a way of testing you. But those challenges, they only make the wins sweeter. Tom agreed. Exactly. It's all about what you do when things get tough. The atmosphere had shifted once again, now filled with a quiet respect. What began as an awkward meeting was turning into the evening carried on with a new energy. LeBron and Tom had warmed up to the group, their earlier quiet moments now replaced by a shared sense of respect. The conversation flowed more naturally, and everyone began to share stories about their journeys to the top. The room had settled into a comfortable rhythm. People weren't just talking about their achievements anymore. They were opening up about the struggles that had shaped them. The stories were personal, vulnerable in ways that most of the world never saw. One of the other guests, a former Olympic athlete, leaned forward. It's funny, she said with a laugh, how we all seem to face the same challenges, no matter the sport. People think success comes easily, but there's so much more behind the scenes. LeBron agreed. People always see the wins, the trophies. They don't see the hard days, the days when you're injured, the days when you're mentally drained, when you feel like you can't keep going. Tom nodded, adding, exactly. You can't just focus on the victories. You have to push through the tough moments. I've had seasons where I felt completely off. But the difference between winning and losing is how you respond when things aren't going right. It was clear now that this wasn't just a dinner. It was a chance for these legends to reflect on their careers and share the real stories that hadn't made the headlines. The glitz and glamour of their successes were part of the picture, but tonight they were peeling back the layers to show what it really took to get there. LeBron continued, I remember a time early in my career when people didn't believe in me. I was called arrogant, selfish. I didn't have the leadership skills people expected, but I didn't let that stop me. I learned from it, and I worked harder. Everyone was listening carefully, taking in the gravity of LeBron's words. It wasn't just about scoring points or winning championships. It was about becoming a better person, a better teammate, and a better leader. Tom shared his own experience. I'd had my share of setbacks too. People questioned whether I had what it took to win a Super Bowl. I was never the tallest or the strongest quarterback, but I had a mindset. I focused on improving my game every day, even when no one else believed in me. And eventually, that paid off. The room was quiet for a moment. These weren't just stories of triumph. They were stories of failure, doubt, and perseverance. The athletes at the table had all faced obstacles, some more public than others. But what made them successful wasn't just their talent. It was their ability to keep moving forward, even when things seemed impossible. LeBron smiled, his eyes reflecting the sincerity of the moment. We all go through the tough times. It's how we come out on the other side that matters. Tom agreed. You can't let the setbacks define you. It's the bounce back that counts. As the night went on, the group of athletes grew closer, their shared experiences creating an unspoken bond between them. It wasn't about the medals, the trophies, or the spotlight. It was about the struggle, the grit, and the resilience that made them legends. The stories they shared that night weren't just for the dinner table. They were reminders of what it really takes to be the best. The night had been flowing smoothly, with stories shared, laughs exchanged, and a sense of camaraderie building among the group. LeBron and Tom were now fully engaged, their earlier hesitations gone. The atmosphere was friendly and easy, as if these legendary athletes had known each other for years. But as the evening wore on, a shift began to happen. It came quietly, at first, like a small crack in an otherwise calm surface. Tom had been listening intently to the conversations, occasionally chiming in with a thoughtful word or two. Yet, when he spoke again, there was something different in his tone. LeBron had just finished telling a story about how he used his setbacks to drive him forward, and Tom, who had been quietly reflecting on it, decided to add his own perspective. You know, LeBron, Tom started, I've always respected what you've done in basketball. It's incredible. But let's be honest, football's a different kind of tough. There's no hiding on the field when things go wrong. In the NFL, You're out there in the spotlight every play. When a quarterback makes a mistake, everyone sees it. And frankly, it's a lot harder to bounce back when the whole world's watching. The room fell quiet. It wasn't the comment itself, but the way it was said that caught everyone off guard. Some of the other guests shifted in their seats, uncertain of how to react. It wasn't harsh, but there was an edge to it, like a comparison that wasn't really necessary. LeBron's face remained calm, but the expression in his eyes told a different story. He let the silence stretch for a moment before responding. "I get it, Tom," he said, his voice steady. "But every sport has its own challenges. Basketball isn't just about making shots or running plays. It's about carrying a team for an entire season, managing expectations, and staying at the top year after year. It's not always about the physical toughness you might expect." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't expecting such a direct response. "I'm just saying, the grind in football is brutal," he added, almost defensively. "It's a lot of wear and tear, mentally and physically. You've got to be tough to survive it." LeBron leaned forward a little, his posture still relaxed but his gaze sharper. "Toughness isn't just about getting hit," he replied, his words calm but firm. "It's also about being mentally prepared for every game, for every opponent. It's about leading a team and holding yourself accountable when everyone is watching. Those aren't easy things to do." The tension was palpable now, but it wasn't an explosion. It was a slow building heat. The two icons weren't angry with each other, but there was a clear difference in perspective. Both had worked hard to get where they were, but their paths, their sports, and their challenges were different. And yet, in this quiet moment, they were beginning to understand just how different and similar their journeys had been. The other guests, sensing the shift, looked at each other nervously. No one knew how this conversation would go, but they all knew it was one they'd remember. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the moment seemed to pass. The tension faded, and the conversation moved on. But for LeBron and Tom, the unspoken words lingered in the air, both men reflecting on the words that had just been shared. After the comment from Tom, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't immediately obvious, but there was a tension that hung in the air, subtle but present. LeBron's calm response had set a clear boundary, but it was clear that not everyone knew how to handle the situation. Some of the guests, who had been chatting animatedly just moments ago, fell silent, unsure of how to proceed. Others glanced nervously between LeBron and Tom, both of whom sat still, their expressions hard to read. For a moment, it felt like time slowed down, and all eyes were on the two of them. LeBron didn't let the awkwardness settle for long. He took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. "I don't want to make this a competition," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's no need for that. We're all here because we've faced our own battles, our own challenges, but we don't need to measure one against the other." Tom, who had been quiet since his last comment, shifted in his seat. He looked down at his glass of water, his fingers tapping gently against the side of the cup. For a moment, it seemed like he was thinking about what to say next, weighing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his tone was more measured, as if he had reconsidered his previous remark. "You're right," Tom said. "I didn't mean to turn this into a contest. We all face challenges in our own way. And I respect what you've done, LeBron. No one can deny that. But sometimes you can't help but think about what it takes to survive in a sport like football. It's not just about winning. It's about staying healthy and keeping your mind sharp in the face of so much physical pressure." LeBron nodded slowly, understanding where Tom was coming from. But there was still something in his eyes, a reminder that he had walked a different path. "I hear you, Tom," LeBron said, "and I respect that. But I've had my own battles. We all have our own paths. I've had to fight through the pressure, the scrutiny, the expectations. But that doesn't make it easier. It just makes it different." The room remained quiet for a few moments as the weight of their words sank in. It wasn't about football or basketball anymore. It was about something deeper, the struggles of being in the public eye, the pressure to constantly perform, and the sacrifices made along the way. It wasn't easy for either of them, and both understood that. The tension, though still present, began to fade as the conversation moved to other topics. But it was clear that something had changed. There was a new respect between them, born not out of rivalry, but from a shared understanding. The conversation wasn't over, but for now, they had found a way to move forward. As the night continued, the group slowly found their rhythm again. The awkwardness from before was replaced by a quiet respect, an unspoken understanding that their challenges, while different, were equally demanding. They were no longer just athletes. They were people who had endured, and they respected each other for that. The evening had returned to a more comfortable rhythm. The tension from the earlier conversation slowly faded, replaced by light-hearted jokes and stories. The group had started to share some of the more amusing behind-the-scenes moments of their careers, the kind of stories that never made it to the headlines, but that everyone could relate to. LeBron was laughing at a story from a former football player about a strange encounter with a fan during an off-season event, and even Tom was chuckling along. It was clear that the earlier moment of discomfort was behind them, or at least that's what it seemed. As dessert was served, the mood in the room seemed to shift again. The rich aroma of chocolate cake and vanilla ice cream filled the air, and the soft clinking of silverware on plates sounded almost peaceful. But there was still an unspoken awareness lingering, a feeling that something wasn't quite right, though no one could put their finger on it. Then, out of nowhere, Tom suddenly stood up. The room quieted instantly, everyone's gaze turning to him. His face was unreadable, and for a moment it seemed like he might be leaving the dinner early, but no one had expected it to happen so suddenly. "I think I'm going to head out," Tom said, his voice calm but distant. "It's been a long day, and I have an early morning tomorrow." There was a brief silence as the others exchanged glances. LeBron, who had been caught off guard, looked up at Tom, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Everything okay?" LeBron asked, his voice steady, though he couldn't hide the hint of confusion. Tom nodded, but there was something in his eyes that suggested more was going on than he was letting on. "Yeah," he replied, "just a lot on my mind, you know." With that, Tom gave a polite nod to the rest of the table, and before anyone could say anything further, he walked toward the exit. The soft click of the door behind him was the last sound of his departure. For a moment, no one moved. The room was still, as if time had stopped. It wasn't like Tom to leave so suddenly, especially after such an interesting and engaging night. Some of the guests exchanged quiet words, unsure of how to process the unexpected end to the evening. LeBron sat back in his chair, his fingers gently tapping the edge of his glass. He had known Tom for a long time, and something about his departure didn't sit right. It wasn't just that Tom had left early. It was the way he'd seemed so distant, almost like he was carrying something heavy that he didn't want to share. The rest of the dinner continued, but it was clear that the energy had shifted. LeBron was lost in thought, wondering if there was something more behind Tom's sudden exit. Had it been the earlier tension in the conversation, or was there something else going on, something personal that no one knew about? The night, which had started with laughter and stories, had taken a different turn, and as the guests slowly finished their meals, the sense of something unresolved lingered in the air. The dinner had wrapped up, but the unusual silence lingered in the air. Everyone slowly began to get up from the table, pushing their chairs back and stretching after a long night of conversation. The laughter and casual chatter had returned, but there was still an undercurrent of something unsettled. The departure of Tom had left a quiet void that no one quite knew how to fill. LeBron, though, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had known Tom long enough to understand when something was bothering him, and tonight was no exception. It wasn't just the earlier comment about the differences between their sports. There was a deeper tension in Tom's departure, something unspoken. As the other guests moved toward the door, saying their goodbyes and thanking the host for the evening, LeBron remained seated for a moment longer. He glanced at his phone, noticing the time. It was late, and the night had stretched on longer than expected. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt that he needed to reach out to Tom. He pulled his phone from his pocket and sent a quick message, unsure if it would get a reply. "Hey man, hope everything's okay. We all felt a little off after you left. Just wanted to check in." He stared at the screen for a moment, his thumb hovering over the send button. It wasn't like him to get caught up in things that weren't his business, but Tom was more than just a teammate or colleague. He was a friend, and LeBron had a deep respect for their relationship. After a few seconds, he pressed send and sat back, waiting. The house had grown quieter as the last few guests left. LeBron's mind wandered back to the earlier conversation, to the moments of tension and the shift that had happened after Tom's comment. He replayed the exchange over and over in his mind, wondering if it had been the cause of Tom's early exit. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something personal that had nothing to do with the dinner. His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a reply from Tom. "Thanks for reaching out, LeBron. Everything's fine. Just needed some time to myself. Don't worry about me." LeBron read the message twice, letting the words settle. He knew better than to push someone who needed space, but the reply still left him with more questions than answers. He typed a quick response, trying to strike the right balance between concern and respect for Tom's privacy. "All right, man. Just know we're all here for you if you need anything. Take care." As he hit send, LeBron felt a slight weight lift off his shoulders. Even though he didn't have all the answers, reaching out had felt like the right thing to do. He put his phone down and looked around the now empty room. The night had ended on a strange note, but he knew that sometimes that's just how things went. It wasn't about solving every problem right away. It was about showing up, being there for the people who mattered. And for LeBron, that was enough for now. The following morning, LeBron woke up with a sense of lingering uncertainty. His phone was on the nightstand, still buzzing with notifications from the group chat, but his mind kept returning to the events of the previous night. Even though he had sent Tom a message and received a quick reply, he still couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. He got out of bed and walked over to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly to let the morning light in. The world outside seemed calm and normal, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. The peacefulness of the early morning helped to clear his mind a little. He knew he would have to focus on his own training and upcoming schedule, but for a moment, his mind wandered back to Tom. The message from the night before still sat in his phone, a reminder that sometimes people just needed space. But LeBron wasn't the type to let things sit for too long. He picked up his phone and sent another message to Tom, hoping to offer a little more support. "Hey, just checking in again. I know you said you're fine, but if you ever want to talk, you know where to find me." He hesitated before hitting send, knowing that sometimes people just needed to process things on their own. But he also knew that Tom wasn't the kind of person to reach out easily, especially when things were bothering him. It didn't take long for Tom to reply. "Appreciate it, LeBron. It's just been a rough week, that's all. Nothing personal, just needed some time to get my head straight." Relief washed over LeBron as he read the message. He had known it wasn't anything personal, but hearing it from Tom made all the difference. The last thing LeBron wanted was for a small misunderstanding to turn into something bigger. Sometimes a bit of space was all anyone needed to reset. "I hear you, man. We all have those weeks. Take care of yourself, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." As soon as he hit send, he felt a sense of closure. He didn't need to know all the details or solve anything right away. Sometimes simply offering support and letting someone know you're there was enough. As LeBron went about his day, preparing for his upcoming games, he found himself thinking less about the tension from the night before. The dinner had been an interesting mix of competition, personal stories, and unexpected moments. It had reminded him that no matter how successful people became, they were all still dealing with their own battles in different ways. The next time he saw Tom, he knew the conversation would be different. They would talk, not about the dinner or the comment, but about life, about their shared experiences, and how they both handled the pressures of being at the top. There wouldn't be any hard feelings, just a deeper understanding. And as for LeBron, he knew that sometimes the best thing he could do for others was simply to be there, whether in the spotlight or behind the scenes.